Just want to say that if this video or any video over the next week or so ends up coming out a little bit later, sorry, but Last of Us 2 just came out, and I have been waiting years to play it, so I got priorities. But yeah, thus far Last of Us 2 has been hard to pull myself away from, so if some videos come late, I am very sorry. That's all I really wanted to say about Last of Us 2 though, so let's just get on to the video. Welcome back to another 10 Years Later episode, the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were impactful to me, to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later for good or bad reasons. This is one that I was very much looking forward to revisiting just because of how polarizing I heard it was, and for a few nostalgic reasons as well. That is the 2010 Eminem album, Recovery. We all know Eminem at this point. He's one of the most enduring, legendary rappers out there, one of the most polarizing as well, but polarizing or not, his trio of albums in the Slim Shady LP, the Marshall Mathers LP, and the Eminem Show are widely hailed as hip-hop classics, and they've been some of the biggest, most wildly popular rap records ever. But despite the incredible success of those albums, Eminem's discography since 2004's Encore hasn't been received nearly as well. I mentioned that Eminem was a polarizing rapper, and in the early days he was polarizing for his dark and violent subject matters, but ever since Encore he's now become more polarizing because of the quality of his projects. And Recovery was just another example. A lot of fans were turned off by its more poppy direction. Even before listening, I had heard a lot of people talking about how this record just sounded dated today, which did get me a little bit nervous to revisit it, especially because the album is 17 tracks and nearly 77 minutes, so per usual it is a bloated and beefy Eminem album. But I will say that I remember giving a lot of tracks from this record a lot of listens when I was younger. I mentioned that back in 2010 I didn't really listen to much hip-hop, but quite a few tracks off of this album ended up being my gateway into hip-hop, believe it or not. Maybe I had heard a few rap songs on the radio when I was younger, but Eminem was the first hip-hop artist that I really properly got into and listened to consistently. But now that I've gotten to listen to the album fully, can I see where the disdain comes from? Maybe a little bit, though I will say I didn't hate it nearly as much as everyone led me to believe I would. There are some tracks I'd say I definitely enjoy on this thing, maybe in some cases more than I probably should. Big example is the track WTP, which stands for White Trash Party. A lot of people hate the song, and ironically, I actually kind of like it. I feel weird for saying that, but I think the song is goofy enough to work. It helps that M actually fits well on the bouncy, glossy beat of the song, and his fun performance helps elevate it a good bit. And the track Going Through Changes is a mature, heart-clenching track from Eminem, as it's one of many cuts on this album where M dives deep into what it was like during his addiction, and how he used drugs to cope with the death of his best friend Proof. He also addresses his daughter Haley on the track, and gives a bit of an emphatic shout out to Kim. It's emotional, there's a tastefully sampled chorus of Black Sabbath's Changes, and it's a pretty strong track that lyrically, honestly kind of makes the follow-up Not Afraid feel kind of puny in comparison. I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but I grew up listening to Not Afraid, and as weird as it's gonna sound, it was probably the first rap song that I really fell in love with. It's just after hearing how much depth Eminem goes into on Going Through Changes, Not Afraid's lyrical deep dive just feels a little lighter in comparison. The track is poppier, a little bit more radio friendly, but I do still like the song, and even if some of that feels intrinsically linked to my nostalgia with it, it's still a highlight for me. Cinderella Man is also quite the banger. I love the triumphant instrumentals led by the slicker guitar riffs. M's performance has all the energy to match. His confidence is really solid, even if some of his lyrics do feel dated. Naturally, you're gonna get that a lot when you revisit old M albums. And I do like the chorus sung by R&B artist Kobe on the track. It's one of the most powerful cuts here, and it honestly could have worked as a closer to the album, though the actual closer, Untitled, which is a hidden track that's apparently called Here We Go in some circles, is one that I do like. M's bouncy flows on the track are really catchy, even with some of the, again, dated lyrics, and the dark beat kind of feels like a throwback to older Eminem songs. It's definitely a very solid finisher to the album, and I do enjoy it a good deal. In terms of criticisms, I'll say one thing I've felt about some of M's recent music is that I feel like I'm not crazy about some of his hooks, and there are a few tracks on this record that I think get ruined by their choruses, like the opener Cold Wind Blows, which has a solid pumping beat, and I love M's catchy flows and some of the playful bars, but sheesh, the chorus is just complete cheese. I don't think I've ever been too floored by Eminem's singing, but here it just sounds needlessly goofy for such a serious song, and without much of a catchy flow or melody, it just makes a song feel a little less exciting. On Fire kind of counts too, because even if Eminem admits on the song that he kind of bullshitted the chorus, I wouldn't say that makes makes it better to listen to. I do think the chilly beat is cool, as is some of M's slick flows on what feels like a bit of a freestyle, though I do think this track reminds me of a major problem that a lot of people have had with Eminem's recent music. The constant desire to answer to critics, specifically with bars like this, where Eminem uses the annoying logic of, "You can't criticize me because you don't actually make music." I'm sorry, that's just such a tired response. It gets really annoying. Other than that bar though, again, the hook just kind of ruins what could have been a pretty solid track. Similar thing for Almost Famous, which features a chorus from Liz Rodriguez that just felt so boring to me. The beat is a bit standard. M's story about his rise to fame is interesting, even if the song has some of his strangest lyrics. I know that sounds weird given that Eminem has a lot of strange lyrics, but I remember being younger and regularly quoting this lyric where Eminem uses anti-disestablishmentarianism because he feels dick is too short of a word. But again, while it's not a bad song, I think the chorus just makes it lose something, which is something I also feel about the track You're Never Over. M once again pays tribute to Proof, and the song itself is an impassioned tribute with some focused lyricism and a solidly emotional beat, but again, Eminem's chorus, yeah, I'm sorry, but M is no singer, and his attempt at singing makes this emotional song just feel laughable at points. In terms of features, I'll say that this album isn't as star-studded as some of Eminem's other records, but there are a few notable features, and I think that many of the collaborations end up working. Kobe, who I mentioned earlier, appears on Talking to Myself, which honestly is a track that I like. At first, I wasn't sure how to feel about Kobe's vocals. It sounded like he was just like an earlier version of like Fetty Wap maybe, but his chorus is still pretty catchy and it fits over the somewhat rock-twinged instrumentals. M's verses are lyrically really interesting as he once again goes into very deep detail about his addiction and the person he was at the time of his drug addiction. He also talks about how he lacked guidance since losing Proof and how he almost dissed artists like Lil Wayne and Kanye West and was about to just start firing shots at random people out of nowhere. It's definitely a strong emotional moment and one of the most potent cuts on the album. Then regular Eminem collaborator Pink appears on Won't Back Down, the huge single that was part of the Call of Duty Black Ops soundtrack back in the day. I remember bumping this song a lot when I was in my late years of middle school and early years of high school. Listening to it now, I know there are a lot of people that aren't crazy about it, and I kind of see why. The mixing feels a bit sloppy, the offbeat feel of the drums is a little bit weird, but I still enjoy a lot of M's punchlines, the background guitars sound very cool, and Pink's chorus definitely sticks with me. It's not one of his best songs, but I do enjoy the track. And then there's also the Lil Wayne featured No Love, a track that was huge for me that I listened to regularly for a long time, and even listened to pretty regularly before coming back to the album for this video. The instrumental pretty tastefully samples What Is Love by Hadaway, and while it almost feels like Wayne has the biggest presence on the song, I do enjoy his verse, and Eminem does make up for some of the missed time with a verse that's one of my personal favorites that I've ever heard him spit. I will go that far to say that. Even a decade later, this is a track I return to often and I still love it. And of course, there's the massive chart-topping single Love the Way You Lie featuring Rihanna, which is another song that I played a lot in my youth. Listening to it now, again, it's one of the poppier songs on the album, and again, I do feel like some of my enjoyment is directly linked to my nostalgia with it. But even though I was turned off by the song for a while, it has grown on me, and I think it's one of the few late album tracks that really works. Even though I didn't dislike this record as much as some people made me think I would, I will definitely say there are some lowlights that I just do not care for. Seduction is a track that bored me in comparison to so many other songs on here. The instrumental is a bit hazy, but it does feel like empty space, and even if M has a few decent, faster flows, some of his sing-rapping bits just feel goofy and bring the song down a little bit. The chorus isn't bad, but I kind of wish Slide Jordan got to handle the entirety of it, as opposed to some of those minuscule passages that he handles on the song. I heard coming into the album that Spacebound was a lowlight, and while I don't actively dislike it, it does feel dull compared to a lot of what else is here. I've heard a number of generic relationship songs on M's new records, and I do think this kind of falls into that category a bit. The beat is light, but nothing too special. M's performance has a few solid flows, but can feel a little bit too screamy for my liking, and Steve McEwen's chorus just feels kind of bland. I don't think it's one of the worst songs on the album, but it is far from being a highlight, and 25 to Life feels a little bit weird to me too. The beat on this one is a little more poppy and clean, which isn't bad, and I don't mind the Liz Rodriguez chorus here, but what feels weird to me is M himself on the song. This is another moment where he feels a little bit too screamy at points, but also, while the lyrical concept of him comparing the hip-hop industry to a toxic relationship is interesting, it's weird hearing Eminem say on the song that he's leaving ending hip-hop when the album still has 5 songs to go and he's got 4 more albums to release. It doesn't kill the song, but it's just a weird inconsistency. And while So Bad might not live up to the title and be so bad, it does feel like a throwaway to me. It's clearly more lighthearted, but the beat just feels more minimal than some of the other ones here. It's a bit boring, M's chorus is cheesy, and I think that lyrically it's one of the least interesting tracks on the album. There's not much in the way of quotables, and at 5.5 minutes, it does feel like it goes on a little bit too long. So overall, in returning to Recovery, I do have to say this is definitely a mixed bag of an album. I wouldn't say I hate it nearly as much as some others might, but I don't think I can fully defend it either. Given some of the criticism, I can say I like the album more than I honestly thought, but it could have been a bit better, and it probably should have been better. In fact, a little over the halfway mark on the album, I was prepared to give this a higher score, but outside of a few examples, the album comes to a screeching halt with a few of its final tracks, and much like a number of newer Eminem albums, it could have very well benefited from trimming off some of the fat around it. I don't know if this felt as poppy or as mainstream leading as some people told me it did, and even when it did, I didn't have a huge problem with that, but again, there's just a good hunk of filler on this thing. What lifts it is that Eminem's performances are impassioned, the production, while occasionally standard, is still solid enough, and most of the guest appearances are very solid too. Other than the length though, I also felt like many of the choruses were a bit sour and sometimes a bit laughable on the album, and again, this could have been far better if it was chopped down to about 10 or 11 tracks. Otherwise, it's far from Eminem's worst, and there are some high points, even if some of my personal highs once again are linked a bit to nostalgia. Back in 2010, as I mentioned, Eminem was my gateway into hip-hop, and as weird as it is to repeat, and as weird as it might sound to a lot of other people, Not Afraid was the first hip-hop song that I really fell in love with. I could honestly see my, at the time, 11-year-old self really loving this album, but listening to it now, I can't say that I do, though it certainly could have gone far worse given some of the disdain that I had heard about it. If I had to give it a rating, I probably would have given it an okay, though it also could have gotten a good if it was about 5 or 6 tracks shorter. As it is, Recovery is decent. By any other name, it may be excellent, but it is a bit disappointing given that it comes from Eminem. It wasn't as bad as some people may have warned me that it would be, even if, again, my personal nostalgia is to thank for that, but I wouldn't say that age suddenly turned this into a high point in Eminem's discography either. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Again, Eminem is a very polarizing artist, so I'm interested to see what you guys think about it. Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. As for what's next in terms of 10 years later videos, I am actually going to be filming my next one right after I shut off the camera on this video, because the next one I'm going to be doing is Miley Cyrus's Can't Be Tamed, which came out right around the same time as Recovery, maybe even on the same day, I think, from what I saw. So as soon as I turn this video off, I will film the video on Miley Cyrus's Can't Be Tamed. So stay tuned for that, but until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.